Which type of monitor should you use for YouTube and video editing? Is it better to just use a normal 16 by 9 inch monitor, or is it better to use a 21 by 9? Guys, welcome back to my channel. So far I always have used a standard 24 inch 16 by 9 monitor. But today I have done a big upgrade because a lot of YouTube creators seem to switch to these ultra-wide monitors, and I have today the LG 38WK95C, which is basically, it's pretty big, massive monitor. I think it's about two 24-inch next by each other and then a little bit on top. So my thinking is what I'm going to do today for you. I show you this curved LG monitor that supposedly is really good for video editing, and I'm directly going to compare it against my old 16 by 9 inch ISO display. So basically I'm switching from a Japanese display to a Korean display, which maybe if you have seen in the news, there's like a little bit of a trade, I don't want to call it trade war, but tensions are a little bit high between the countries. So I hope they figure this out. But I mean, it's to be expected after, I think South Korea did seize Mitsubishi's assets. So obviously there's going to be some fallout from that. Let's see whether there's going to be a slump in the economy and how this is handled. But guys, I digress. If you're new to my channel, let me quickly remind you, right now you're watching the introductory part. In part 2, I'm going to do an unboxing of this monitor, show you what's inside the package so that you have a little bit of an orientation. And then also very important, I'm going to walk you through the assembly of this desk mount, so you got to be a little bit careful there. And then once that is out of the way, in part 3 I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison, and I'm going to especially look at maybe not so much the color profiles, but at the video editing software. Obviously, if you're like a super professional video person that wants to do like record log footage and do color grading, maybe an LG monitor is not perfect for you. For color grading, I think I would still stick with the ISO color edge line, because they have a true 10-bit input and I think a internal 16-bit lookup table. But for the LG, I think it's okay for most content creators. Obviously, I don't have an external recorder. My camera doesn't shoot log footage. So for the most part, this LG display should be fine. And that's what we're going to compare in part 3, side by side, the old 16 by 9 with this new super wide 21 by 9. So I'm very excited. Guys, without drawing this out too long, if you want to jump to a particular point, you see the navigation here in the description below. There's some timestamps, or you can just drag the slider. That way you can always jump to your spot that you are most interested in. So let's get rolling. Right now we jump to part 2, the unboxing part. And I mean, I really have to say this monitor is so massive. I never had such a wide angle monitor on my desk, so that should be really great for video editing. And up here, obviously pay a little bit attention to that. Put the display onto this styrofoam, and then I'm going to show you how to mount this in a second. This was, I think, a weak spot, so you don't want to put the display on the with that bottom, the control knob on the desk. I mean, that might be coming loose, so that's warning you. But guys, it's a little bit difficult to do this with one hand, so I think I'm just going to take it out of the box and show you in just a second how to assemble the stand. Here, I guess it's the power supply and a few cables. So just let me lift this out here for a second. And yeah, if you follow the instructions, that should be all go very smooth. There's like this styrofoam liner below here that's also curved, so it suits the monitor very well and protects it. The important point is that you don't put it on the desk with this bottom part, because there is the control knob, and that could be maybe damage the control knob if you kind of accidentally hit that here. So just be a little bit gentle. And then with the monitor arm, maybe in one of my other videos, let me know if you don't want to see a monitor arm. I saw some people have used these successfully. I'm just using the included stand. I think the previous generation of this 21 by 9 guys had a plastic stand included, and I think this is here all metal. You're going to see that in just a second. So maybe that's maybe I'm going to keep that and not get an additional monitor arm. This is here really nicely curved. So let's check this out first. Excellent, guys. I switched the camera angle, and there was a lot of plastic foil on that display. Actually, I felt a little bit like unboxing an iPhone or some kind of Apple device. So I think that's more and more common with manufacturers to put these plastic foils on there. The desktop stand here, that's metal actually, solid metal. This instead feels like a little bit plasticky. I think it's not much of a big deal for me. It's important to have this big size so that I can edit my timeline. Interesting is also the height. I'm gonna check this in a second, how high up this goes, because I personally like it if the monitor is a little bit higher. That way when I edit my video footage, I don't have to look down that much, which is more comfortable if you have to work long hours on that system. Here, quick look at the accessory box as well. They put a bunch of accessories in here. There's also a difference between the ISO monitors that I used to use in the past. The LG has a separate power supply, this big fat brick down here, so that's not integrated into the display. Let's see how this works. A lot of adapters and cables. I personally like to use the display port. That works well for me. I've seen that a lot of YouTubers, they seem to like to work mobile and they use their MacBook Pro and they connect it via USB-C, and that way they have only one cable to plug in. And while I think this is a cool design, I don't like to use MacBooks necessarily. I still have my old Mac Pro, the Tower Mac Pro, the Mac Pro 5.1. That works very reliably still to this day. And I feel, especially if you export video, it's nicer to have like a big tower. You can just swap in different hard disk drives. You can, when you export a video file, the CPUs and tend to get really hot. Now granted, a lot of these professional YouTubers, they may shoot like on a little bit more expensive cameras than mine. I just have a very old Canon EOS M3, and the most consumer cameras, the codecs that the cameras use to record the video footage is not very efficient. There's like basically intercodec and intracodec, and maybe the professional YouTubers, they all use higher quality cameras with external recorders, and then they shoot in ProRes, and that's more gentle on your hardware resources, so they might get away with shooting on a mobile device. But I always feel like if you have a MacBook, it's so thin. If you do put a lot of load on the system, it just gets too hot, because if there's heat, it needs surface area to dissipate. And I think that's, when doing video editing and export, the Tower Mac Pros, they just have a bigger surface area. So that's going to be, I digress a little bit, but why don't I just put on that arm, and then we can monitor stand, and then we can jump to part 3, the side-by-side test of my old display versus the new display. And guys, that was really very easy. You just put this on and then it snaps into place. Very straightforward process. I don't want to draw this unboxing part and installation part out too long. Let's just go ahead and jump to part 3 and do the direct comparison. Excellent guys, we jump to part 3. And right now you can see on my desk the side-by-side comparison. On one side, the 21:9 LG monitor, very big, very spacious, huge working space. And on the other side, my old 16:9 24-inch ISO display. And obviously it is much smaller. And a good way to demonstrate this real quick is, let me quickly open up the video editing software right here. And yeah, I'm using this ISO display, and even though it's a 24-inch 16:9, you can do video editing on it, you can get work done, but it's very compact. Everything is compact. I think with iMovie you can still get away with it, but as soon as you switch to Final Cut Pro, there are some more elements that you can control. The normal 24-inch 16:9 is just too small, and a good way of showing this is just moving this right over, and you can see you have significantly more space. You have more space at the bottom and you have more space at the side. And keep in mind, right now, I'm not even running the LG at full resolution. I mean, yes, I'm running it at the full resolution, but I'm running it scaled so that there is the symbols, everything, the bar down there is a little bit bigger, and also the bar at the top, because if I move a little bit over here, I'm used to this kind of size of my writing and of the symbols, so that's about the same. And let me quickly show you what happens if you're running the LG display at the native resolution. You get even more space. So right now I switched it to the native resolution, and you see this space and this space got even wider. The trade-off is the bar down here, the symbols get smaller, and here also the writing gets smaller. So I don't like to run it at the full 3840 times 1060, but instead you can just hit the Alt key and then maybe pick something that's a little bit lower. I think I like to go with 3200 times 1333 scaled. That way I retain the same size that I'm used of all the writing and symbols. Obviously I'm sacrificing a little bit of space, but that's totally fine with me because I mean it's a massive display. If I maximize this right here, you can see you have a lot of screen real estate on the timeline. You can just move through the timeline, and it's a little bit of a funny effect because the display is curved. Every time you move around like this, it feels a little bit weird, almost like a carousel that's moving. So that's totally different as opposed to working with a normal flat display like this. And yes, it improves the workflow. I feel you can edit to the footage slightly faster. And I think the big difference is, obviously, if you use Final Cut, if you need more elements here. Obviously, iMovie is somewhat minimized, so it's not such a big deal. But this is very nice to use, and one of the main strengths why so many YouTubers seem to be interested in these ultra-wide monitors. And over here is the menu. You have to push that button and then navigate to the side, and you get to settings. And then it's a little bit more cumbersome to do some adjustments, like for example brightness, because you have to go into the menu again, you have to go into the menu again. Then you can adjust the brightness, which is fine. What I also noticed, the brightness adjustment, the LG seems to be brighter than my old ASO, but you cannot dim it down nearly as much as with the ASO. I think the brightness adjustment with the ASO is much better. It's finer. So if you're working in a dark environment and you want to dim it down a lot, the LG might have some limitations there. Granted, it should be fine in most cases. Color profile wise, see again, the menu has disappeared, so I have to go in here again. Guys, I hope this is not too cumbersome to watch, having to do this here with one hand. So you go to picture, you confirm, you go in here, and then you have these different color profiles. I think this is a little bit more consumer level color profiles. I think the ASO monitors have a little bit better selection, or usability I should rather say. And also notice the ASO has a light sensor, so you can even let the monitor itself regulate the brightness. Obviously that was macOS Mojave, that was not the monitor right there. This is like a dynamic background here. So the main point that I want to make is here I just touch it and I can change the brightness. It's a very fine adjustment, really very fine, and it's very quick and easily accessible. So I like this a lot. If you want to change the brightness manually, you can do that here. The color profile wise, obviously this is the flex scan line, so you have these settings. But if the color edge line I think is really good if you want to do professional work, because the color edge line from ASO, that gives you Rec 709, BT 2020, something like this. So that's a quick example. I can show you this in a summary and conclusion part a little bit in detail. Overall, this should be a monitor that's great to work with if you're doing video editing, or if you're maybe a gamer, or you have to do multitasking, you have to have several documents open. In fact, I did some accounting on this LG, and it was really good for accounting because you have so much space. You can have maybe the accounting software on one side and then your documents on the other side. So that's really nice. That was always a little bit too small on this old monitor. However, I still like the image quality of the ASO a little bit more, although I have to say it's a subtle, very subtle thing. Unfortunately, as far as I know, ASO doesn't do these ultra wides, so that might be a trade-off. And also something I noticed, which maybe for some people, they may say, oh, this guy's a little picky, but I found the DisplayPort cable was a little bit short. So if I put that in the middle of my desk, only the LG on my desk, I cannot use this thing here to organize the cables because the cable is just too short to plug it into my Mac Pro. And the same is true for the power. I cannot route this through here because they made the cables a little bit short. So I wish LG had made the cables a tiny little bit longer, because I don't want to take this power brick and put it just right below there where my feet are. That's a little bit not as useful. If you compare the ASO, the cables are just longer. So that's a convenient thing. I don't know why LG did that. On the other hand, I think I mentioned this before, so the ISO is raised to the maximum height. However, when you edit video, obviously the timeline is here at the bottom and you don't want to look down that much, so you want to have it raised a little bit, and the LG does a good job. I can raise this up very nicely, and you see it probably disappears at the top here, but yeah, you have more space, it's higher, it's wider, and you can do a great job with video editing. So far I like the LG, however I found a few other things to keep in mind. So let's jump to the summary and conclusion part, and I'm giving you some additional important information that you can consider. Terrific, we jump to part 4, the summary and conclusion part. And one important thing that I noticed while looking through the LG website, you might want to check this out as well. If you go to the LG website, I think it says multiple times, or it's very prominently positioned that it's like, oh, it's an HDR monitor, it's an HDR monitor. And but if you look at the fine print, it says 8-bit plus FRC. And from what I've looked up, 8-bit FRC is not the same as a true 10-bit display. So I know it's not a perfectly fair comparison, but let's quickly look at the LG and ISO display up here. I put that in the sidecar. And as you can clearly see, while the ISO display is a really professional display, I would say the LG is more like a consumer, or I think I should better say a prosumer level product, simply because it has the 8-bit FRC and the sRGB color space, while the more professional ISO, and again, it's not a totally fair comparison, the ISO is twice as expensive as the LG, but it has a true 10-bit display and it has a 16-bit internal lookup table, and very nicely, it has these presets like Rec 709, but more important, the BT 2020. I hope I pronounced this correctly, guys. I have to do this all on top of my head. The main point why I mentioned this. If you're a beginning YouTuber, maybe you can ignore that. It's not as important to you. But if you're a little bit more serious or professional and maybe you want to do color grading, especially of HDR content, then I would almost say a lot of cameras nowadays, at least the pricier ones, they start to support log footage. So maybe you have a Panasonic GH5 that can output log footage. Maybe you have a Canon EOS R that can output log footage. Or you have a Sony that can output log footage, and you're using your camera maybe with an external recorder such as the Atomos. Then obviously if you look in the Atomos, it can record for the most part, I think 10-bit BT 2020. Again, I have to do this all on top of my head. The point is, if you want to produce HDR content, which many of these higher up cameras support, then my personal opinion is I think the ISO should give you a better color accuracy if color grading is important for you. In all fairness, the ISO is smaller. It's only a 27-inch 16:9. So that's really the strength of the LG. It's a 21:9 and it has a huge, massive space. And in all fairness, I also try to play a game, and there I noticed, boy, if you play a game on here, I did play Titanfall on this big screen monitor, and then I switched back to the old monitor. Wow, that's a real difference. So if if these YouTubers tell you, wow, the LG is so great for video editing, yeah, wink wink, it's great for video editing, but I think secretly it's a gaming monitor as well. Obviously I don't want to do gaming, that's a little bit of a waste of time, but I tried it nonetheless. For me it's more about the productive things, and yeah, you can slice through the timeline much faster because it gives you so much space. So that's really cool. But from a color perspective, I think I would still prefer the ISO. Obviously the ISO, I think you cannot really game that well on the ISO, at least not on the color edge line, because the ISOs, I think they're also slower, I think 50 milliseconds. But you can check this as well on the manufacturer side. I just wanted to give you a basic understanding what's the benefit and maybe what's the downside, and that this is, in my opinion, a prosumer product. Terrific, guys. Obviously I have a lot of other display reviews on my channel. Let me quickly show this to you here. If you look in the playlist for displays, you can do a bunch of comparisons. I have tested a variety of them already, and a lot of my viewers like to compare different products before they make a purchase decision. Obviously digital cameras, microphones, audio interfaces, a lot of the tech gear on my channel, and also some useful tutorials. I always try, or I always sprinkle in some extra knowledge. I don't try, I do that for you. And that's why I see you in the next video, and maybe if you want, as a subscriber. Guys, terrific for tuning in. All the best to you. Have fun with your new monitor. It's good for gaming, it's good for video editing, for color grading. I give it it's okay if you don't have a professional aspiration, let's put it that way. If you're a consumer, prosumer, then this is terrific. Awesome for tuning in. All the best to you. Take care.
And because you just watched my review of the LG 38WK95 curved ultra-wide monitor, you may also want to compare them against more classical 16:9 devices from ASO that I've also reviewed for you on my channel. Guys, let me know what kind of displays you also want to see, despite the ones that I already have in my playlist. You can subscribe right now as well, as many people have already done before you. All the best to you. Take care.